The Judgment, Music, and Exile. Chamber of Eternal Voices, the Great Council Chamber floated in the void. Between stars, a structure so ancient that no living being remembered its construction. Inside its crystalline walls, representatives from 847 civilizations gathered for a judgment that would echo through centuries. The air hummed with translation fields as thousands of voices merged into a single purpose. At the center of the chamber, a holographic display showed a small blue planet rotating slowly in the darkness, the newest discovery in a galaxy already crowded with life. High Chancellor Meridax of the Collective raised 3 of his 7 arms for silence. His species had been part of the Council for 40,000 years, longer than most civilizations had existed. His voice carried the weight of ages when he spoke. The matter before us requires no debate. The evidence is clear and disturbing. This species called humanity has shown themselves unfit for galactic society. The display changed, showing images that made even the most hardened council members uncomfortable. Human history played out in brutal detail. Wars that consumed entire continents. Weapons designed to poison the very air and water. Cities reduced to ashen moments. Millions dead for reasons that seemed incomprehensible to species who had long ago evolved past such violence. The humans had spent most of their recorded history finding new and terrible ways to destroy each other. The evidence against humanity. Ambassador Thelm from the Kororix Federation stood next. Her people were known for their logic and careful consideration. She had studied the human data files for months, hoping to find some reason for mercy. She found none. We have observed 47 major conflicts in just the last century. Of their timeline, they have created weapons capable of ending all life on their own planet not once but hundreds of times over. They continue to build these weapons even now, knowing the danger. The council chamber filled with concerned murmurs. Species who had never known war looked at the human records with horror. Those who remembered their own violent pasts looked at humanity and saw a dark mirror of what they had once been, except humanity showed no signs of moving beyond it. Even their entertainment glorifies violence, added council member Vrax, a being of pure energy contained within a magnetic field. Their stories celebrate conflict and dominance. They teach their young ones that strength comes from defeating others. This is not a civilization ready to join us. This is a threat waiting to grow. High Chancellor Meridax called for the vote. The question was simple: should humanity be welcomed into galactic society, or should they be contained? The vote was not close. Of the 847 council members present, 846 voted for containment. Only one abstained, a young delegate from a newly admitted world who still remembered what it felt like to be judged by others. The barrier descends. The punishment was decided quickly. Humanity would be isolated. A barrier would be placed around their entire solar system, cutting them off from the rest of the galaxy. They would have their sun, their planets, their moons. They would have everything they needed to survive. What they would not have was contact with any other species. They would not have access to galactic technology. They would not have the knowledge that might help them reach for the stars beyond their small corner of space. The technology to create such a barrier was ancient, used only a handful of times in galactic history for species deemed too dangerous to exist. Among others, massive generators were positioned at precise points around the solar system. When they activated, reality itself bent to their purpose. A wall of twisted spacetime surrounded Earth and everything within 8 billion km of their sun. Nothing could pass through it. No ship, no signal, no light from outside could reach in. Nothing from inside could reach out. On Earth, humans watched their night sky change. Stars remained frozen in their positions, but the lights of galactic civilization, the radio signals, the quantum communications they had just begun to detect, all of it vanished in an instant. Humanity had been talking to the galaxy for less than a year. They had been so excited to learn they were not alone. They had prepared first contact protocols and chosen ambassadors. They had dreamed of joining something greater than themselves. Humanity's response. Now they stood alone again, but with the knowledge that they had been judged and found wanting. The message from the council was brief and formal. It appeared simultaneously on every communication device on Earth and in every human colony across the solar system. People of Earth, you have been evaluated by the Galactic Council. Your species has demonstrated patterns of behavior incompatible with peaceful coexistence for the safety of all galactic civilizations. Your solar system has been placed under containment. This barrier will remain until such time as your species demonstrates fundamental change. We wish you well in your isolation. The reaction on Earth was complex. Some people felt shame at being judged so harshly by civilizations they had hoped to join. Others felt anger at being condemned for their history without being given a chance to prove they could change. Many felt fear at being trapped, cut off from the universe beyond their small bubble of space. But beneath all these emotions, something else began to grow. Something that would define humanity's response to their exile: determination. Dr. Sarah Chin stood before the Emergency Assembly of the United Earth Government 3 days after the barrier appeared. She was a physicist who had been part of the team trying to decode the galactic signals before they were cut off. Now she proposed something radical. They have trapped us here because they fear what we might become. Let us show them what we can become in spite of their fear. We have our sun, our planets, our asteroids. We have billions of minds and hands ready to work. We have been given time. Let us use it. The projects began immediately. If humanity could not learn from the galaxy, they would learn from themselves. Every resource was redirected toward advancement. The colonies on Mars and the moons of Jupiter were expanded rapidly. Asteroid mining operations grew to scales previously thought impossible. New technologies were developed through pure human innovation without the crutch of alien knowledge to guide them. 2 centuries of silence. Years became decades. Decades became centuries. On Earth and throughout the solar system, humanity transformed itself. They learned to work together in ways they never had before. The old nations and their borders mattered less when faced with the reality that all of humanity was trapped together. Conflict still occurred, but they were resolved through means other than war. The weapons capable of destroying worlds were dismantled piece by piece, their materials repurposed for construction rather than destruction. The humans built cities on every world and moon. that could support them, they created massive stations in the asteroid belt. And around the gas giants, they learned to manipulate matter at the quantum level. They developed energy sources that made their old technology look primitive. They created artificial intelligence not as servants but as partners in their endless quest for knowledge. Most importantly, they watched the barrier. Scientists studied it constantly, learning its properties, understanding its mechanics. They could not break through it, but they learned from it. The technology the Council had used to trap them became a textbook for advanced physics. Humanity learned more from their prison than they might have from 1,000 years of galactic tutoring. 200 years after the barrier appeared, humanity had become something the Council would not recognize. They had kept their resilience, their creativity, their drive to explore and understand, but they had tempered it with wisdom earned through isolation. They had learned that strength did not have to mean domination. They had discovered that competition could drive progress without requiring destruction. The barrier still stood unchanging and impenetrable. Beyond it, the galaxy continued in its ancient rhythms, unaware that inside their prison, humanity was preparing for a future that would surprise everyone, including themselves. The Council had meant to contain a threat. Instead, they had created pressure, and pressure, given enough time and enough heat, transforms everything it touches. The breaking point in Revelation, the Zarn emerge. The galaxy had enjoyed 200 years of relative peace after humanity's exile. The Council met regularly in their ancient chamber, mediating disputes and welcoming new species into the fold. Trade routes flourished, scientific cooperation reached new heights. The decision to isolate humanity had been proven correct by the very fact that everyone had forgotten about them, out of sight, out of mind. The small blue planet behind its barrier became a footnote in galactic history, cautionary tale told to aggressive young civilizations about the price of violence. Then the Tsar appeared from the galactic core and everything changed. They came without warning, their ships emerging from jump points across a dozen sectors simultaneously. The Zarn were unlike anything the Council had encountered in 100,000 years of recorded history. They did not communicate, they did not negotiate, they simply attacked with technology that rendered Council defenses useless. Their weapons passed through shields as if they were not there. Their hulls absorbed energy fire and grew stronger from it. Entire fleets vanished in minutes, their last transmissions filled with confusion and terror. High Chancellor Krevix, who had replaced Meridax 3 generations ago, watched the tactical displays with growing horror. In just 6 months, the Zarn had conquered 23 Council worlds. Millions were dead, billions more had fled as refugees. Every military strategy failed, every weapon proved ineffective. The Zarn swept through the galaxy like a wave of darkness, unstoppable and merciless. Desperate measures. The Council convened in emergency session for the 40th time in as many days. The chamber that had once held 847 species now held barely 600. Some civilizations had been completely destroyed, others had withdrawn from the Council entirely, choosing to hide in the hope that the Zarn might pass them by. The representatives who remained looked exhausted and afraid. These were species who had not known real war in thousands of years. They had no experience with an enemy that could not be reasoned with. We must consider every option, Krevix announced, his voice heavy with fatigue. Our conventional forces cannot stop them. Our technology is insufficient. If anyone has knowledge or resources we have not yet attempted, speak now. The galaxy depends on it. The chamber fell silent. They had already tried everything they could imagine. Kinetic weapons, energy weapons, biological agents, temporal disruptors, dimensional shifters. Nothing worked. The Zarn adapted to every strategy. Within hours, it was as if they existed outside the normal rules of physics that governed everyone else. A small voice spoke from the back of the chamber. What about the humans? The entire assembly turned to look at the speaker. It was Delegate Iris from the Mantari Union, a young species who had joined the council only 50 years ago. She stood trembling under the weight of hundreds of stares. But she continued, the humans, the ones we exiled 2 centuries ago, perhaps they could help. The suggestion was met with immediate opposition. Absolutely not, declared Ambassador Thelm, who had aged considerably but still served on the council. We isolated them because of their violent nature. Releasing them now would be trading one threat for another. Besides, what could they possibly offer? They have been cut off from all galactic advancement for 200 years. They are probably still fighting among themselves with primitive weapons. A disturbing discovery, but Delegate Iris had done her research. She had spent weeks in the council archives, reading everything available about humanity and the barrier technology. She had found something that made her question the assumptions everyone had made. With respect, Ambassador, I believe we should at least investigate before dismissing the idea. 3 months ago, our deep space monitors detected unusual energy patterns near the barrier, fluctuations that should not be possible. This caught the attention of Krevix. What kind of fluctuations? Iris displayed her data for the council to see. The barrier around the human solar system was designed to be absolutely stable. It drew power from 0-point energy fields and had no moving parts to fail. Yet the monitoring stations positioned to watch for any attempt to escape had recorded periodic variations in the barrier's energy signature. Small variations, barely noticeable, but they occurred with increasing frequency over the past decade. Someone has been testing the barrier from the inside, Iris explained, not trying to break through but studying it, learning it. The pattern suggests sophisticated scanning technology, possibly more advanced than what we used to create the barrier in the first place. The council chamber erupted in debate. Some members insisted this was impossible. Others argued that even if humans had advanced, they could not be trusted. A few pointed out that desperate times required desperate measures. The argument continued for hours until Krevix made a decision that would change galactic history. We will send a probe through the barrier, he announced. We will observe what humanity has become. Then we will decide if they can be approached, but we will do this quickly. Every day we delay, the Zarn claim more worlds. The probe's discovery. The probe was sent through the barrier 3 days later, equipped with the best sensors the council could provide. It emerged in the space near Neptune and began scanning the solar system. What it found shocked every scientist who reviewed the data. The solar system was unrecognizable. Massive structures orbited every planet. and major moon, Saturn's rings had been partially dismantled and reformed into a network of habitats housing billions. The asteroid belt had been transformed into an industrial complex that stretched across millions of kilometers. Energy signatures indicated power generation on a scale that exceeded many Council core worlds. Advanced ships moved between planets with ease, their designs elegant and efficient, but most surprising was Earth itself. The planet glowed with city lights from pole to pole, but the atmosphere was cleaner than it had been when humanity was exiled. Orbital stations surrounded the world in layers connected by elevator cables that stretched from the surface into space. The moon had been terraformed, its surface now showing patches of blue and green visible even from deep space. This is impossible, whispered one of the council scientists, reviewing the data. In 200 years, without any outside help, without any guidance, how did they advance this far? The probe moved deeper into the system. Approaching Mars, the red planet was now partially green, massive terraforming projects having transformed nearly a third of its surface into habitable land. Cities stretched across the transformed regions connected by transportation networks that moved resources and people with incredible efficiency. The probe sensors detected technology that the Council did not fully understand, quantum computers operating at scales thought impossible, energy manipulation that bent the rules of thermodynamics, material science that produced substances with properties that should not exist. Then the probe detected something that made every Council member pay attention. Near Jupiter, human ships were engaged in what appeared to be military exercises. Hundreds of vessels moved in perfect coordination, testing weapons and defensive systems. The energy readings from their weapons made the Council's military advisors go pale. A single human warship appeared to have more firepower than a Council dreadnought. The message, before the Council could decide what to do with this information, the humans sent a message. It reached the Council chamber directly, bypassing every security protocol. The technology required to accomplish this should not have existed. The message was simple and direct, delivered by a woman who identified herself as Director Elena Vasquez of the United Solar Defense Initiative. Greetings to the Galactic Council. We know you are watching us. We have been watching you as well. We know about the Zarn. We know about the destruction they have caused. We know you are afraid and running out of options. We are willing to help, but we have conditions. The Council members stared at the display in stunned silence. The woman spoke with calm confidence, showing no fear or resentment about the exile her species had endured. Behind her, the view showed what appeared to be a command center, filled with advanced technology and busy personnel. First, the barrier must be removed permanently. We will not be caged again. Second, humanity must be granted full membership in the Galactic Council with all rights and privileges. Third, we require access to all information about the ZAR and full tactical command of any joint military operations. These are not negotiable. You have 12 hours to decide. The transmission ended, leaving the Council in chaos. Some members were outraged at being given ultimatums. Others were terrified of what humanity had become. But Krevik saw something different in that message. He saw competence. He saw preparation. He saw a species that had spent 200 years doing exactly what the Council had feared they would do, perfecting the art of war, but he also saw something the Council had not expected: discipline, control, purpose. The vote took place 8 hours later. This time, 589 members voted to accept humanity's terms. Only 11 voted against. The barrier generators were deactivated, and for the first time in 2 centuries, the wall around the solar system came down. Humanity emerges. The human fleet emerged within days. 300 warships jumped into Council space near the besieged world of Proxima Station, where Zarn forces had surrounded the last major Council military base in the sector. The Council fleet defending the station was down to less than 100 ships, desperately holding position while civilian transports evacuated the planet. Below, the Zarn had been preparing their final assault when the human ships arrived. They moved in formations the Council had never seen, each vessel positioned with mathematical precision. When the Zarn turned to engage this new threat, the humans struck with devastating efficiency. Their weapons tore through Zarn hulls that had resisted every Council weapon. Their shields deflected Zarn fire that had previously been unstoppable. In 30 minutes, the Zarn force was destroyed completely. Not a single enemy ship escaping. The Council observers could barely believe what they had witnessed. Admiral Kor, who commanded the defense of Proxima Station, opened a channel to the human fleet. His voice shook with emotion as he spoke. "This is Admiral Kor. To the human fleet, we are in your debt. How did you defeat them so easily? We have been trying for months with no success." The response came from Fleet Commander James Chin aboard the flagship Determination. His voice was professional but warm. "Admiral, you have been trying to fight them with the rules you learned during peacetime. We spent 200 years preparing for war we hoped would never come. We studied every conflict in our history and learned from every mistake. We built weapons designed for one purpose: to protect what we value. The Zarn are powerful, but they are not unbeatable. They just needed to meet an enemy who understood violence as well as they did." The new era begins. In the weeks that followed, human fleets deployed across the galaxy. Wherever the Zarn appeared, they found humanity waiting. The tide of the war turned rapidly. The Zarn, who had seemed invincible, were pushed back. Sector by sector, they tried to adapt to human tactics, but humanity adapted faster. Every battle provided data. Every engagement revealed new Zarn weaknesses that the humans exploited ruthlessly. 6 months after the barrier fell, the Zarn withdrew from Council space entirely, retreating back toward the galactic core. They had suffered losses they could not replace. They had encountered a force that matched their aggression with superior strategy and technology they could not overcome. The galaxy was saved, but it was changed forever. The Council that had once judged humanity unfit for civilization now owed their survival to human intervention. High Chancellor Krevik stood in the Council chamber, now rebuilt on a new world, after the original had been destroyed by the Zarn, and addressed the assembly. "We made a decision 2 centuries ago based on fear of what humanity was. We were wrong, not because humanity was not violent, but because we failed to understand that violence is not the same as evil. Humanity showed us that strength can be used to protect rather than destroy. They showed us that the Capacity for war does not mean the desire for conquest. They showed us what we had forgotten in our millennia of peace, that sometimes survival requires the willingness to fight. Director Vasquez stood among the council delegates representing Earth and all of humanity. She listened to Krevix's words and thought about the journey her species had taken, 200 years of isolation that could have broken them had instead forged them into something stronger. The exile meant to contain them had given them time to evolve, not just technologically but philosophically. When she spoke, her words were simple but carried weight. We do not blame the council for their decision. You judged us by our past, and that past was violent. But you gave us something valuable, even if you did not mean to. You gave us time to choose who we wanted to become. We chose to be protectors. We chose to be ready for threats like the Zarn. We chose to turn our capacity for violence into a capacity for defense. Thank you for teaching us that lesson, even though you taught it as a punishment. The council chamber filled with the sounds of approval from hundreds of species. Humanity had ascended not by proving the council wrong, but by proving themselves worthy of trust. The exile was over. New era had begun, and in the darkness between stars, other threats watched and learned that the galaxy had changed, that there was a new force among the civilizations of light, one that remembered how to fight and had learned when fighting was necessary. Humanity had come home not as the violent species that had been banished, but as guardians who understood that peace sometimes required warriors willing to stand against the darkness. The council had exiled Earth to protect the galaxy. Instead, they had created the very protectors the galaxy would need to survive the end.